All right.
We can go anywhere.
No problem. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Seek refuge in God from Satan, the rejected. All right, everybody. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming to the event. Brother Homi will be conducting this event. I would like to start first by reading some verses of the Quran. I thought I'll just start off with a quick intro, just in chapter 2 in Surah Baqarah, by just reading a quote from Abraham and his son Jacob. Chapter 2, verse 130 says, "Who would forsake the religion of Abraham except one who fools his own soul? We have chosen him in this world, and in the hereafter he will be with the righteous. When his Lord said to him, 'Submit,' he said, 'I submit to the Lord of the universe.' Moreover, Abraham exhorted his children to do the same, and so did Jacob. O my children, God has pointed out the religion for you. Do not die except as submitters. Had you witnessed Jacob on his deathbed, he said to his children, 'What will you worship after I die?' They said, 'We will worship your God, the God of your fathers Abraham, Ismail, and Isaac, the one God. To him we are submitters.'" And I just want to start off by introducing Brother Homi. He will be conducting this event. He'll be explaining the neuropsychology and the chemical science behind young children. And yeah, God bless you all. Thank you for coming. And we'll be starting off with probably about 20 to 30 minutes of Brother Homi introducing with the lecture and bringing some good points. And then we'll have the floor open to people asking questions and giving their inputs, inshallah. So please, Brother Homi, the floor is yours.
Peace be upon you all. The smartest people on this earth. It's a pleasure to be in your presence. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I wanted to just have a mention. I want to thank Brother Abdullah for organizing this event, and I wanted to mention Sister Lisa, who actually came up with the original idea of raising Semitic children. I also want to profoundly thank Brother Naveed, Brother AAA, Brother Dude, and the rest of the administrators, Brother Abdullah, for keeping a tight ship of submission and making it grow. So thank you for this event and this space. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The issue is that originally we decided to raising a submitted children, and Brother Abdullah gave reasoning as to it's going to be righteous children, but that's fine, it's okay. I wasn't raised in a submitter family. I was raised in a traditional Sufi Shia family, so I didn't have that experience. My point is that God does that. First, we have to be aware that God is the one who actually allows someone to be a submitter. In 2:10, God says, to God, everything will be returned. 10:46 again, the ultimate return. 28:70, you will return. And 694, God says, you have come back to us as individuals, just as we created you the first time. So we have, as parents, we have this notion that we actually own our children. It's something that belongs to us. But yet, God says, as individuals, again, 1884, as we created you initially. Then 23:101, God says that when the horn is blown, no relations among them will exist on that day, nor will they care about one another. In 43:67, God says, the close friends on that day will become enemies of one another, except for the righteous. And in 2:84, to God belongs everything in the heavens and the earth. So really, when you think about it, our children or anything else at all doesn't belong to us. So we have to get rid of all the assumptions we've got about this. And one major point about that is that I want to say is we then got to go beyond the assumptions as being submitters ourselves and basically try to sell something that we've got experience of. So I would actually like to begin with a very short poem that basically reflects what God says. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. The archer, the God, sees the mark upon that path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. Now, we begin the essentially brain development. So when the child is born, the brain isn't evolved. And, up to about 6 months, not even the vision is evolved. All the machinery is out there, right? Basically, the child is born with the entire brain that child is going to have the rest of its life. But what is this development? I mean, when we talk about the brain, we just think of these just neurons. But a single neuron means nothing at all in the brain. There are many people who've had brain injuries and they conduct normal lives because these neurons then form networks, and our cognition is basically based upon these networks. For example, and these networks basically are formed from subnetworks, which have got a few hundred neurons. For example, when you start looking at a color, you see the color, but you see a face with a color. Then is a different network to see the face, and then is the color network that'll paint that face for you with the eyes, with the hair color, with the skin color, and so on and so forth. So these are basically networks. And these networks are fluid. They have what is known as plasticity. So they don't have a fixed form. When they become fixated, it becomes basically the basis of pathology, because there is no change, there is no learning, there is no forming. And these feedback systems are extremely important at an early age. So if we want to think about pushing a child to submission, for example, firstly, we can't do it. And the second thing is that we have to provide the ground for that to occur, right? And these grounds really come from the kind of feedback we are providing to the child. Because essentially, it's just, you can keep the child there and just feed it and the brain will grow. But if the child's going to be in a room when newest experiments is done, when you, like primates, for example, just kept in a room. And in fact, devoid of having any contact. It's a very sterile white room with a metal chair with a sheepskin on it, and it's fed there. It doesn't know who comes and brings the food, and it thinks it gets that from there. And you then slice that brain, you realize there are big holes in the brain. So basically, this brain that we're talking about, it develops. Its connections are depend on the feedback from outside, from the environment. And we go back to the social theory, who are these that provide that feedback. So that is extremely important. It's actually been shown how the brain is basically developed by external environment and people. So the feedbacks come from two things: the environment and the parents. You know, to feel hungry, and then food, water, safety, and then the parents, how the parents then guide the development. So the first thing is you got to get to know your child, because not every child is the same. So you got to be vigilant very, very early on in stage to see what kind of personality your child will have and how to actually facilitate that development. The other thing I wanted to mention is from the Quran, chapter 4, verse 1. God says, "O people, observe your Lord, the one who created you from one being and created from it its mate. Then it spread from the two many men and women." And embryologically, this is absolutely correct, because, when the embryo is formed, it goes through two pathways, Mullerian and Wolffian. Wolffian pathway would produce testosterone, and Mullerian pathway would produce estrogen and progesterone, which are the specific female hormones. Basically, what happens is you end up with the ovaries, and what testosterone does through the development drops those ovaries and they become testicles. So basically, ovaries and testicles are the same thing. They just go through a different developmental pathway. So you just got to realize that we are actually made of one being, and we're going through a different pathway. So it's extremely important to be sensitive to the parent. The parents have to be very sensitive towards each other, because not only the child observes this, but the child gets to learn this. And we go further on towards how this develops complexes. And you got to realize that your child is made of both parents, the male and the female. And the child gets a mixture of the characters, sometimes more from one parent than other, right? But the main point is that the harmony that you got to have as parents is the only way you can harmonize with your child, because half that child is yours, that one can easily deal with it. The other half is got the characters from the father or the mother. Now, how did you then come together? How did you then resolve that? We'll go into how you get feedback to your child. The other thing is that the brain at that time develops by play. Most of it is feedback, and neural connection is developed through play. And if you just imagine one single neuron is got about 10,000 connections with the other neurons in the network. And every time the child learns something, particularly something complicated that they have to use their bodies, their eyes, their ears, play with you, contact with the parent. Each time when it's novel, it's playful, you can add between 3,000 to 5,000 extra connections. So it's just basically astronomical number of connections in the brain that form because of that. And the opposite is also true when you subject your kid to an adversive behavior. Then you end up having a reduction and basically a different connection would make, right? And then I'll describe that, how that happens. So basically the play. So you want to teach your kid about play. And this is how I taught my son when he was 3 years old, with play outside. I taught him what gravity was, for example. We went down the driveway, we poured water. Then he goes and does his own experiment, bring his paints and pour it down, and says, look, Daddy, look, gravity. And I said, look, who made this? God did. So subtly you start introducing an awe component to your child. Because an awe component basically reorganizes networks of your brain. It breaks the standard view that the child might have, that awe. And he actually does that with adults as well. When you start seeing awe. One day, the other thing is that, okay, play is one thing. Intuition and curiosity is another thing. So once you start introducing the notion of God and how powerful he is, how the world is so complicated to understand, and you can easily explain it, there comes the value of experiments. So this is what I said from beginning to my child, that, okay, it's fine. If you want to know something, you're going to have to actually do it to understand what happens. So one day he comes in, he was 6 years old. He comes and says he wanted to break glass. And I went, oh my God, this fear, glass, breaking glass. This is the one I said that, you got to experiment. You got to find out how the world works. He wants to break glass. And how is that? My God. So I said to him, okay, you want to break glass for what reason? And so I want to see how it breaks. I want to actually see it. I said, okay. So when I got some clear plastic bags and I got bottles, and I put the bottles in a clear plastic bag and we threw it down the stairs and it broke. So he saw it. And then he wanted to do it again and he wanted to do it again. So I recorded it on the phone in slow motion so he could actually see it until it went out of the system. Because what happens with kids is they don't see the whole story in one go. They see it in subtle bits and pieces. That's why, if you notice, they want to watch one movie they like or one cartoon they like many times. But at each time, because the processing of the brain isn't complete, they see one bit of it. And they see another bit of it. And they see another bit of it. And in the end, they get it. So if that process is interrupted, we inadvertently start causing creating psychological complexes, which are basically knots in the flow of your consciousness. And that is the importance of that development. Now, how is that? When the child is developing, the structures that usually do other things in functions and they grow older, for example, go to the second stage of that when they started, going just after the age of 5 to about, say, 11, 12. The structure, earlier on the structures, the two particular structures, one of them is called hippocampus that deals with your laying down of your memory and in recall of your memory. The other is the limbic system that deals with your emotional capacity, in particular fear. Right? So earlier on in the piece, the emotional center actually tried to deal with the memory while the memory center deals with the emotion. Right? It's a bit confusing. And that's why you find that we don't remember anything from the age of 0 to 3 or 4. Basically, at best you have a warm and fuzzy feeling about your childhood, but you have no memories on those. It is simply because this is the functional development of the brain. And upon these bases, actually recently, once we started understanding exactly how these developments occur, you have this concept now called memory implantation, where a lot of people, because they had vested interest, planted false memories in children. And there are experiments that are at 45% of the population susceptible to that. And these people went and sued their fathers, their uncles for early childhood rape and so on and so forth. And after these people spend, some time, years in prison, it was reinvestigated and they found that there was a psychologist who was doing this and so on and so forth. So for this reason, the kid is susceptible. And it will take at face value what it is that you're doing. And this becomes extremely important in development of emotional intelligence of your kid. So it's just not good when the kid just breaks a glass or drops something on the floor for us to approach that with anger. Because it's being processed in a different part of the brain. So it links in that terrible behavior with the parent. And that's how it develops. And it doesn't understand why that is wrong. That reasoning would come later in life. And it's quite a complicated development. That's where most of the focus of this talk is going to go, as to how that feedback system would occur. So just let your child be disobedient, because it's something that they're going to learn, something they do. They've got no understanding of how the world works. And then we jump in, we think, okay, fair enough, I've got this stick, and this stick will prevent the kid from doing this. They're going to learn that earlier on in the piece. But that actually basically sends the kid inward, stops the inquiry, and as I said, intuition and curiosity will go out of the child. And that's damning, because one of the ways that we sit there and we introduce submission to people, it is really an appeal for the person to see submission as a new way, a possibility. And that requires creativity, curiosity, and the intuition that is correct. And these are developed earlier on by interaction and feedback that we get from our early childhood development. So it's extremely important. I remember I read an article some time back about children development, and this psychologist was saying that, look, the children are basically psychopaths. Got no compassion. They're selfish. They go and do things, right? So in a way, how do we develop that in a child? So when my child, he could actually communicate with me, talk to me, and understand. He was about 1.5 years old. He started talking about 1 month and 1 year. And by 1.5, close to 2 years, I started to teaching him about his emotions. So we've got in Australia, actually a British little cartoon called Thomas the Tank Engine. And it's very simple. It's just a tank. It's a train with a face. And it's got 2 eyes, eyebrows, and a mouth. Very simple. Nothing too complicated to do. So I put his chair, I feed him, then I put Thomas the Tank because he liked it, because I went through the story with him. And I paused the video when Thomas is angry. And I said, now that Thomas is angry, how can you tell he's angry? At first he didn't know. He said, oh, look at the eyebrows. Look at the mouth, it's going down. Look at the eyes, sad. So look, the mouth is down, isn't it? And then I put happy face in front of him. I say, well, he's happy. I said, why? He said, oh, Daddy, the mouth is going up. I said, yeah, that's right. And then I put angry face of Thomas. Look at the angry. Oh, look at the eyebrows. They go downwards. Look at the mouth. So I started teaching him that to be emotionally aware of himself and others. So I say, look, what happens when you're happy? He says, oh, jump around. What happens when you're sad? Oh, I sit down and I come to you. I sit on your lap. I say, okay. So you don't really want to suppress your child's behavior at an early age. What I need to do as a parent to become aware of my behavior as a child. Because I don't remember when I was 3 years old. Now I've got a 2-year-old child. And you got to become a student before you can become a teacher. So you see it in a different context. And this context that I'm introducing here is that you don't remember what you needed at that time. Here is this child is teaching you what it needs, whether male or female. As I said, the path through submission, it doesn't from us doing it, but we have to prepare that ground for that. So do not suppress your child's feelings. When your child's angry, throwing things around the place, what do? We nip that in the bud. We suppress that behavior. Right? So I'd go in there and say, oh, I can see that you're angry. You're not happy. What's happening? You hungry? And sometimes the kids go like that. They become hungry, and that's the emotion that comes out and called hangry. So in a way that you have to read that, like you read them when they're born. You responded to, oh, yes, I've got to go. Oh, I've got to change. Hungry. So you translated just screams as to what the child needed. Here, the child's getting a bit more sophisticated, but that sophistication really depends on the kind of feedback that he gets from you. So basically, punishment is the realm of God. It's not a realm of parents. Because through punishment, as these networks are developing, when you hurt the child, now you got to just perceive this. You got 2-3-year-old child, and they are totally dependent on the parent. This big, humongous human that is capable of obliterating my existence. So there's a natural fear involved with that. The other aspect of that is I'm dependent on this creature for my safety, for my food, for my water, for my care, for love and attention. So you got to help the kid to resolve this. Punishment is not a way to resolve that, what is known in psychotherapy as archetype. Is basically building material that form your positive and negative cognition, right? So the role is to allow a child to make a mistake in safety, because that's how they learn. And if they're not safe, if they're threatened, they will not do that. So basically, you end up having a hole in the brain, causing a hole in the brain by wanting your kid to sit in the corner and say nothing, and that's a good kid. Oh, don't question me about submission. Let me tell you something about that. But when you take that mistake, you go through it. That develops, that makes the kid understand, because when you punish and shout, then everything goes to the emotional center and you go through shutdown. After that, kids don't hear anything. And they have to basically resolve in a way to stay out of your way, because they don't know what it is that they've done that brought that out, but that's a pretty terrible thing. I'm afraid of that. So you send the psychological connection with you. These are the first steps of fear connection. And I come to that in development complexes.
God bless you, brother. So sorry to cut you off too. Just in 2 minutes, I'll be opening up the floor for questions, if that's okay. If you want, and I'll just you can continue. But
sure.
but you're still going to keep going. Obviously, you can keep going. I just wanted to maybe just a quick Q&A.
As far as we can continue with this, but as far as you want, I mean, if there are any questions, you can open up the floor now. So far.
Oh, okay, I had a couple of questions. I just wrote down. Whenever you're finished, I don't want to stop your flow.
Okay, so basically, what happens is that when the kids get threatened when they make a mistake, they don't understand what it is that they've done to start with, right? And it's not their fault. That's what I said. It's important to actually, for a parent to get to know the child's behavior, to see, okay, well, that kid does that. My kid used to do stuff like that, right? But he just wanted to know what happens. It's not that because, he does these things because he's evil. That develops a trust, which is one of the basic things that allows you to describe complicated things like God and submission to your child. That is the only value, that's the only key that you have as a parent. That trust that the kid has. That firstly, you're not lying to that child. You're not punishing in any shape or form for that child. You describe the situation. And the child doesn't feel that they're suppressed when they come to you for something. And as a result, the child will develop self-respect. So we can pick up that understanding rather than shooting down. So here's the concept. The best way to go about that is to literally, out of 100 things the kid does, right? A 3 or 4-year-old kid, 2-year-old kid, when you start looking at them, when they start getting go, when they can walk, can talk, they got muscles, they got a lot of interesting things around them. When you start observing them, just be around them, not too much parenting. Out of 100 things they do in a day, 100 of them are dangerous or wrong. But if you're going to pick the kid on every single one of them, out of 100 things that a kid does in a day, they can't get anything wrong. They're right. So what happens to self-esteem? How is it developing? I can't get anything right. I'm always wrong. That's what happens. So basically, you ignore that, you pick up the thing, you reorganize that, you explain what happens here and there. You pick up the one that you can actually break down and describe the reasoning behind your interventions, so that the kid can actually learn from that. Not that everything else he's doing is wrong, right? And let them act out their choices. So I remember make up something in a different way, the food that he's used to, he didn't have it. And he was adamant he's not going to have it. I said, okay, I'll make you something else. So that allows a self-respect that you actually hear the child and you're responsive to the need of that child, and you're prepared to change your program or your way to suit the child. They become empowered at this stage. So you set up that developing fluid network, right? And these responses go to subcortical structure, the unconscious structures, and strengthen the old primitive part of the brain with the new one, right? So I stop here because I stop here for your thing because it gets a bit more complicated. Oh, please go ahead, Brother Abdullah.
Okay. God bless you, brother. I just had a couple questions. I thought just 2 questions I'm going to ask. The first question is, what's one way that we can see these changes or developments occur in young children? And also, you mentioned environment is a big factor, but can genetics also play a big part as well?
Absolutely beautiful.
I have a question.
Yes, sorry. Yeah. On the whole, it's just take a note of Brother Abdullah. So what was your first question, Brother Abdullah?
So just what's one way that we can see these changes and developments occur in young children?
Yeah.
And the second question was, you also mentioned environment is a big factor for this, for their raising them, but can genetics also play a big part as well?
Absolutely. Yes, sister, what was your question?
So generally, most of us in parenting, we don't go to class. We kind of recall how we were treated, or what we picked up from the society growing up, and we use that in our own parenting. We don't go take class, majority of us, and also the cultures of Middle East and Iran is more like towards fear-based, and only the kids should respect parents, should listen to adults. So all these damages, how can it be recouped at later age?
Right. That, sister, that's beautiful. I don't know whether we have time to go around that, because what I wanted to go through was 2 things. The cognitive development as to why that is the case. The other thing is that I would say about fear-based, we can go through that. I can actually explain that in terms of how complexes do that, and how parents generate that. But reversing it uh, usually requires adult psychotherapy, because that fear results in that whole complex, results into the alteration of the archetype, means that you end up with, say, in the case of a male, also occurs in the case of females as well. In a male, you end up with anger issues and resentment. You see what I mean? Then you need to sort of basically take the person through it and make them aware, because that gets locked into the subconscious. What you're saying is extremely important, because the other aspect of cognitive development is the cultural input. And that cultural input has that power to basically alter an understanding of the father or the mother. Right? So that fear basically alters the way that the child, if the father is overwhelmed, basically a terrible human being, and so on and so forth, you develop that negative relationship and a fear-based response. Unfortunately, if that goes on for too long, for many individuals, they get basically wired that way. But reversing it, we can go and we'll discuss that a bit later. Brother Abdullah, firstly, to see something, you got to be aware of it. You got to be aware of these changes. For example, you see what your kid does, before the age of 1, you say 6 months, they don't even see you, but you play with them, you're happy, you just feed them, they sleep most of the time, because that's how they're, part of the development. But when they start seeing you, they started looking at you, right? And this is where you become aware. These are the first signs, as they are interested in you, interested in your voice. You always keep it calm, right? And they add stuff to it. So, for example, once they can walk and say and talk, say at the age of 1 year and 2 months, you might see that they'll be interested in the books that we're showing them, and they'll go pick one. They come to you. I want to read this. I want to look at this. Right? So in a way, by observation, you can see how they are doing it. And also the environment, that you see that once they start walking, they bump into things, but then they don't bump into the table anymore. They actually hold the table if falling down.
Wow.
So it's
That's brilliant.
To do with
That's brilliant.
to do with the observe. And as they become more competent with their language skill and their movement skills, then this is where your behavior also changes towards them, right? So you don't behave like they were when they are 2 years old. You elevate your behavior in terms of explanation and approach and the amount of freedom that you give them versus that, because now you can see the motor control, you can see what they're doing. Genetics, yes. Genetics, earlier on that I said, I just didn't want to make things complicated. The kid, it's a male child, then get X's from the mother and Y from the father. If it's a female child, you get an X from the father, an X from the mother. And within the X chromosome, you got those multifactorial stuff. And we don't want to go into syndromic and genetic diseases. But yet, most of that behavior is dominant through the gene of the kids receive from the parent. That's what I said. The first thing is you get to know your child. The child could be like the father or the mother, right? Yeah. And then you have an early resentment by one of the parents towards the child. Oh, look, just like your father, just like your mother, right? It's just that the sort of said that harmony comes in, that understanding that genetics take a factor in this form, that yeah, part of that kid comes from the person. So if you've got an issue unresolved with your kid about that, it's nothing to do with the kid. Go and resolve it with the mother or the father.
That's a very good response, brother. So I don't have a question, actually, but I was hoping to pass the floor on to our young brother, Omar. He's actually a second generation submitter, grew up and raised in a submitter family. God bless him. God bless him so much. He's a very, mashallah, very, very bright young man, very well respected, very respectable. You guys are all going to hear it as well in his voice. He's, mashallah, strong striver, goes to school, but comes here and still tries to, learn, preach, spread the message, helps us with debates and discussions. Mashallah. Brother Omar, if you're there, please, I would love to, if you have maybe 5-10 minutes to spare, if you could just tell us your experience. What was it like growing up as a submitter child in a submitter family? And was there any noticeable differences between you and other children that you would have noticed yourself?
Peace be upon you, everyone. Yeah, brother Abdullah. It's a good question. For me, it's first of all, it's a blessing from God that we receive the ultimate truth. We receive the ultimate message on becoming a submitter. Not everyone can see that message. And growing up in a submitter family, it's truly, really a blessing from God. As my family, they've been a submitter for over 20 years. And, growing up, I've always prayed to God alone. And, aside from that, I'm the eldest in my family. So my family, my mom and dad, they have expectations for me on becoming a good example for my brothers and sisters, in my family. So I had to be the example. And, growing up as a teenager, you experience all these kinds of stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like, for example, you would have friends that drinks alcohol, for example. You would have friends that smokes weed, friends that, it's all friends that are attached to this worldly life. And it's sad to see it, that they're so attached to this worldly life where they don't even believe in the afterlife. They don't believe their purpose in this world. And like I said, I had to be the example for my brothers and sisters. I always had to remind my younger brother, who's also like my age, like 17, 18. Yeah, you got to be careful. You got to do not get involved in those kinds of things. It's not good for your future. And it's just,
Brother Omar, sorry to interrupt you. I wanted to ask you. You said you had to be an example.
Yes. Yes.
How did that make you feel? Like, did you feel pressured? Was that externally generated by expectations of your family and your social setting, or was that purely generated by yourself? And how did you feel through that? Was that, were you forced? Did you feel okay about it? Did you feel a lot of weight on your shoulders?
Yeah. Well, not at all, brother Homi, because, it's actually a role that the elder brother should play for their smaller siblings. They should set a good example for them. Like for me, like even now, praise be to God. I've never really have any interest in submission. Although I'm, I was always a submitter, but like I said, I never really preached. I never really read the Quran. I never really prayed 5 times a day. I was just me as a teenager, but like it was not pressure at all. It was just it was a characteristic of me since I was a kid. I was always like this, it's all, it's God who made me the person I am today, and I've always been that way most of the time. I was always have to be that kind of person who would remind other people, would remind my brothers and sisters, my cousins, to not do that, to not do this. I had that leadership skill. I had that characteristic, and all praise be to God, but my mom and dad, my family raised me that way. To be good, to be humble, to be kind to people, to show, generosity, and just to be good, and like in my teenage year, most importantly, although I had the message of, not idolizing anybody, being on the submission path. Most importantly, I was sincere. And I believe that was the path to being a righteous person. You have to be really sincere to yourself. You have to be really honest to God. You have to be, as you have sincerity in your heart, I believe God will guide you. But if you let your ego overcomes you, then it's all Satan's, And like for me personally, since I was 12 to this time, maybe 13 or 14, but since I was at that age until now, I'm going to be 18 soon, God willing. I've been praying, I've been talking to God every night, and not a night I miss. I've been talking to him every day. It was my passion. It was, although I had minor sins, but I repented. I talked to him. I just talked to him every night, and that's why, like that's why. How am I here today? My uncle gave me the Discord server. Praise God, and like the math miracle keeps coming at me, and I don't have any doubts anymore. Praise God. It's just it's beautiful. It's really beautiful, but it's also, like me, for example, I'm in America right now, and I have to go to the bus every morning to go to school, and as I walk through the school bus, going to my seat, I would take a look at the people inside the bus, and I'll take a look. How blessed am I to be a submitter? I'm the only submitter in the bus. I'm the only guy who knows about the truth, who knows about the math miracle, who knows about worshiping God alone and not idolizing anybody. It's amazing. It's a blessing for God, for all of us in this VC to know about the truth, to be in here. It's a true blessing from God. There are 2 billion people in the world who don't know about it. More than that, billions and billions of people who don't know. Most people think that they're right. Most people don't care about it. They just, they're attached to this worldly life. They're thinking of, having fun, partying, having chicks, those kinds of things, And, like growing up as a teenager, you can become a submitter. You can be happy. You can have fun. By God law, you can. Like me personally, I go to parties too, but I don't do wrong stuff. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I go by God's law. I have fun with my friends. But growing up as the righteous children, the most important role is it's the parent. Most importantly, genetic plays a good role too. But it's God guidance who, it's God who decided who will be righteous, who will not be righteous, and it all depends on God. And, parents and brothers, like elders, set a good example for their brothers and sisters who also play a good role. Praise God, yeah.
Maşallah.
Peace be upon you.
Maşallah. Peace be upon you. God bless you, brother Omar. Thank you so much for that. How about you, Tivak? Would you like to say something, my brother?
Well, I just want to. I know this might be a little bit irrelevant, but I want to let you know that I have looked more into the footnotes, and these. Now I feel like the messenger is indeed like a genius. Like, how did he even find all of this? Like the way he connects the information and the way he connects the verses, one verse with another verse to give an explanation. Like, yeah,
Crazy.
this is beyond the human capability, unless he's a messenger.
Praise God, praise God. God bless you, my brother. Thank you so much for that comment. But we'll save it. Let's save it for after this event, okay?
Okay.
God bless you. Thank you so much. It made us very, very happy, though. It was a beautiful bonus to the thing. But again, brother Omar, thank you so much. God bless you as well for your lovely speech there, lovely explanation there. You can really see the differences. I know myself personally, who are looking at young men, young women your age, and seeing that just what we're mindful about. I can really see the difference in it. In the mind.
Praise
MashaAllah. God bless you guys. Praise God. And yeah, that's. Is there anyone else? Anyone else have any questions regarding the topic about raising righteous children?
Also, is the age of 40 relevant to this conversation, as it's about raising righteous children, or no?
I'd say not at this event. So maybe the next time, or the event after that, because we're sort of going by younger ages, working up. But if you have any maybe questions regarding young children, but Brother Omar was just sort of explaining his experiences growing up in a Semitic family. If maybe you could explain what it was like growing up in a Quran alone family. But no, is there anyone else here that anyone that wants to ask maybe Brother Homi a question? Or if no one does, Brother Homi, please, we would be more than happy to have you continue with the things that you were talking about earlier. Some of the things you were explaining was really amazing. A lot of things to learn, a lot of very good information, a lot of very, very powerful information there. I know I was taking a lot of notes for one day, inshallah, when I have future children.
Yeah, I have a comment.
Oh, please go ahead, sister. Please. Thank you.
Yeah, I think definitely raising children with God's teachings are true blessings, is all light and guidance. But then we all come from the baggages of ourselves growing up in certain cultures, certain settings. And even with the good parents, all the cultures of Middle East is just, there is not much respect for children. It's all about respecting adults and being fearful of parents and just obeying them no matter what. This is, and they say this is their religion. This is falsely. They sell that, and they don't let children to grow to be themselves in Middle Eastern culture. So while, alhamdulillah, coming here and in communities that they have masjids and there are kids, and they hear the message of God and light of Quran and explanation of messenger, but we still have those baggages. And I think we still, as not only we have to follow God and grow in our faith, but we have to learn correct parenting and inshallah try to not do what has been done, what we have learned as parenting, or without becoming educated about it. I myself, I'm guilty of that. But for example, children can make their parents really sometimes frustrated, and I think also Rashad explains that we cannot beat children, and patiently we need to talk with them. So I think it's important to get rid of our own baggages. Inshallah, if you guys still don't have children, and learn good parenting.
Yeah, God bless you, sister. That's really good comments there. MashaAllah. Yeah, is there anyone else here? There are a couple other brothers and sisters here who are currently raising submitter children. If they would love to make a comment, please, we would also love to hear it as well. Okay, then we'll possibly move on. Yes. Oh, yes. Brother McLincoln put a comment in the chat. I'll read this out for him. God bless you, brother. This is a very good one. Also, Rashad actually does mention as well. He really was well ahead of his time. He says that you cannot beat your children as well. No physical beating whatsoever. This is obviously really, really bad. And also, he mentioned that this is something that he's learning in med school. The effects that this has on children. I myself have done a little bit of research on it as well, and I've known people, and I got the occasional back of the hand too growing up, by by older relatives. But yes, we know that this is obviously not good at all, and it can really, really traumatize a child. It can cause a lot of damage, not more physical, to the body, but to the brain. Does a lot of emotional damage, a lot of psychological damage. But yeah, God bless you, brother. That was a good reminder, good comment to add there as well. But yeah, does anyone else have any comments they would like to add? Anything that they would like to share with us regarding the topic? If not, brother Homi, please, the floor is yours again. We'd love to hear you speak.
Thank you. I'd love to. I have to say that I just loved every comment. I took away Brother Omar's actually going to be hopefully our next part of the development, and he basically said it all. And I take away the things that I started with is I started saying that it's God's choice, and God chooses whom He guides, and He actually said that. He repeated it. Love and self-respect is another take-home message that I get from Brother Omar, which we discussed that, because the kids at that stage are the first stage of bonding with the parents, and that approach basically provides that feedback. And we go through this later on, at the role of how to teach the kids submission about God, which Brother Omar mentioned. I'm very proud of you, young man. It's fantastic. It's just blew my mind. You blew my mind. Sister Light also made, and I'll take away from her comment about the nature of guilt, which we will discuss, and how it develops. I want to add this additional comment, because you mentioned the societies of Iran and Middle Eastern cultures. There's a feedback loop in that, and that is the oppression of women. The way that women are oppressed, they don't basically want, and that again we discussed that at the later stage of how we prepare our kids for society. We don't want our kids to go and get hanged. In society, Iranian society, for example, they're hanging young people all the time. So just imagine the mothers don't want that. So what are they going to do? They're going to basically give that feedback loop from a society, which is a dangerous one. And that fear, part of that fear, developing that fear is through guilt. And you mentioned that guilt. I'll take that. But I wants to link it with another complicated issue, the oppression of women in these so-called Islamic societies. But we'll come to that. I'll just continue with the rest of the stuff if you guys don't mind. The comments from Brother McClinton as well. I just didn't have time to read them. But I just have to say that all of you guys are geniuses. This is what God says. He says, only the intelligent come to me. So, I think all of your comments are just absolutely phenomenal, mind-blowing. So we are back at this development. So this whole thing, we were at the punishment and how we deal with that. With no punishment, how we deal with guiding a child through a mistake. Right? First, you got to make sure that the kid understands what that mistake is, and the mistake is okay. You can say, I taught from a very early age to my child, and he said, "Oh, I did this," and I said, "That's fine. You can always say that's a mistake, and that is fine as long as you're aware of it." See, this goes to development of the major part of the brain, prefrontal cortex, because these additional part of the brain that we have, this thin layer on top, evolved about 70,000 years ago, and no other animal with a brain has it. I mean, whale has got the biggest brain in all the creatures, but is incapable of having the kind of reasoning that a human child can have. And this prefrontal cortex has its own reasons for doing the kind of things that it does. But knowing the structure of the brain doesn't really help with the understanding of our cognition. So the kid knows that he can go and pick up an apple next to a leaf, right? Say at the age of 1, he will go and put anything in his mouth for two reasons. One, that you need to introduce the bacteria to the gut. And basically, our food is the byproduct of our bacteria in our gut. Human body doesn't produce anything. The only thing we produce is getting the building blocks from the gut through the blood and make protein to make our system, our DNA and our system. So basically, it's the product of the bacterial processes in the gut. So that's one of the reasons why the kids would do that. But as they grow older, they will make that distinction between going there and having a bite of the apple and not eating the leaf. And it goes back to Brother Abdullah said that how do we see this development, right? So it's extremely important and very sensitive, because the prefrontal cortex is a conscious cortex, is the one that controls two main behaviors. It talks to the primitive brain, which ours is exactly the same subcortical structures, quite similar to our closest relatives, which are bonobo chimps, but they don't have the executive function. It's called the associative cortex. They don't have that. No other animal has that. And just think that, in evolutionary terms, 70,000 years for developing Cro-Magnon, which is us, it becomes like a speck, like we just created. If you're God looking at the timing, it's exactly what he says. I created it. And I said it, bang, it happened. And you put it in geological terms, that's exactly what happened. And Rashad mentioned that too. Bang, we appeared. Okay, we got building blocks from everything else. So that development does two things. It does learn, and it does inhibit the primitive brain. So what does the primitive brain do? Anything it wants. Our young brother Omar was saying that he goes and sees these young people at that stage. What do? They go and take drugs and have sex and everything else. This is not the function of the prefrontal cortex, because you don't learn anything from it. This is basically governing from bottom up, not top down. So the behavior changes by the response feedback of the parents. Because the two different branches of development at this earlier stage. One become automatic and one become controlled. The automatic responses are directly towards the feedback that the child gets in early childhood from the parent. So I've got an example of I know I'm jumping a bit forward. So if you have a father that is in the roles that I've got for the psychological complexes. So if you have the knowledgeable, because that's what happens, the knowledgeable called the MKOs, more knowledgeable members of your family, that determines exactly how the child has that connection with the father, right? Is it positive or negative response from the father through the complexes? So the father complex. So if you have a positive father complex, first, and this is the relationship, how this prefrontal cortex that carries our thinking and emotional capacity evolves. We have in the archetype, in the basically suit that determines our psychology, our relationship with our father shapes our senses through the prefrontal cortex of authority, discipline, and power. So a positive father complex then fosters confidence and sensitiveness. A negative father complex can lead to fear, rebellion, and anger issues that become a dominant part of the automatic processes. When you perceive a threat, you automatically behave. You don't see the outside world anymore. That is the part of that development of the brain, but that development of the brain doesn't really say much about how our cognitive capacity is developing. And this is how our cognitive capacity is developing over a developing brain. And these are set very, very early on in the piece. So once you get a perceived threat, it's automatically a complex of a negative father response. And the functional part of this negative, going back to this automatic processing, you don't learn anything. There's no learning. And once people don't learn, how are you going to expect that they're going to learn a submission versus something else? If they're going to go into some church and the father would be very nice to them and everything else is going to accept them, then they say, okay, well, this is it. This is for me. So you're completely out of a submission with that kind of father as a submitter. Because that person has more value from the MKO, the more knowledgeable member of the society. We haven't come to that, describing that feedback that basically creates the networks. By those, as I said earlier on, is association between these neurons. There's a few hundred of them in each sub-networks that process and give all that information to the higher centers, higher networks, like your front part of your brain, to process it. And this is how we make that child. This is how the child will do. I'll give you an example. For example, when my child was about 3, he threw something at his mum. Adam, piece of plasticine or something, and he hit her eye, and it was terrible. And she sat there and cried. So he runs to me and says, "Oh, Mommy's crying." So we went in there and I asked him, "So well, what happened?" He said, "Oh, I did that." I said, "Well, what does she look like to you? What's happening to her? Is she happy? Is she sad? Is she angry?" He said, "No, she's very sad, Daddy. She's hurt." Oh, I said, "Okay. So how do you think we can help?" And this is because what I've done. This is another thing with where our young brother Omar mentioned love, right? Because that's what I extend to him when he's hurt and upset. He said, "I'm going to go and tell her it was a mistake. I'm going to give her a hug and I'm going to apologize." I said, "I'm proud of you, Daddy." This is exactly what he did. Ran towards her. And he didn't know that that's the behavior that matches that response. He did that, gave her a hug, said he's sorry, it was a mistake, he didn't mean to do it, and cried with her. And she hugged her and loved her. So that's the kind of feedback response you get from the parent and a mistake. Sometimes these mistakes are grievous, right? But nevertheless, your response is the one that creates the kind of connections the young evolving brain could have. So you encourage compassion and love, right? Now, it brings us to the next point. Don't dwell on the mistakes of your children. Once the mistake is done, then the setting is changed. Everything's in the past. You dealt with it. Everything is fine. You don't bring that to the next discussion again. Oh, don't do that thing because every time you do that, it's going to happen. I know what you're going to do. Right? So you bring in the whole baggage, as our sister Light was talking about. This is how the baggages are formed. For us dwelling on the mistakes that the kid does. A mistake means it's developing, it's trying to have an understanding, it's sending out tentacles into the environment, is making those decisions, and that's the main part, that's the evolved part of this mammal, right? This primate they call the human. The other ones don't learn as sophisticated because and become that later as to why that is important. Because that's important if you develop that part of the brain earlier on without damaging it, then the kid end up having a reasoning skill, would need that for higher, complicated cognitive processes. And that's exactly what our young brother Omar said, that he obviously has got quite an evolved, but he's in the final stages of it, that he can see the wrong things. He can see, and he makes that executive decision. Why? Because he was raised in a submissive family. Why? Because he was loved. Why? Because God guided him. So the machinery was there. God prepared everything from the beginning. The Quran says, when they decided to throw Yusuf into the well, I knew where Joseph's destiny was going to end. God already prepared all that. So what is this thing about us? As I said, that to be able to teach, we'll have to understand exactly what submission means to us. We have that experience. We can pass that experience on. So we do not dwell on the mistakes. The other part is, don't make an association between the mistake that the kid does, because this is a growing process, with your love. Often they say, we go back to what Sister Light said, the baggage. There's a formation of the baggage, sister. Oh, I don't love you if you do that. I'm not going to love you. You basically dropped out of submission. But as I said in the beginning, everything belongs to God. So what are you saying? I don't love you. It's just the use of that blackmail, the dependency that the child has on you. And a parent knows how much power they have over that child. So they have to learn to understand and use that power as a ground for the child through submission and belief in God alone. And I would say the early childhood is more to do, like the way I did it, was more to invoke creativity and possibility by talking very subtly about God with my child. Because the rest becomes the tools, right? It becomes the tools after you develop an understanding about God, the power, the creation, just the awe that you bring in. So the kid actually gets to know God first. That is the major cornerstone. That's why you avoid saying, oh, if you do that, I'm not going to love you. So your love becomes conditional, not as a guide. So you have to leave the past behind quickly. Kid drops something, breaks something, quickly finish it, clean it up, over, gone. But what happens, and some people may just stop the kid going through the table with a glass on it, or just go pick up the glass or something. Just don't let the kid to have that experience and have trust in itself. Like I broke the other one, I'm going to go back and correct that mistake that I had. But what do you think? We're trying to save the child. Overparenting. But that doesn't lead into developing the child, self-esteem, and that the point of view of the child matters, because that's the way they learn. That is the proper feedback, normal feedback. And as a result of not dwelling on the child's mistake and passing it quickly, leaving the past behind, don't bring it into the dimension, right? You allow the kid to change their affect, their emotion. Oh, that is so terrible, right? Then they realize that they don't have to stay in that mode for too long. So again, the baggage is not going to develop. It's called guilt. The more we keep that past running a child, the more we are rewiring a malleable brain, a developing brain. It was first came by it's called by a guy called him. Cerebean learning. The neurons are fired together, wired together. Right? So the firing of these brains create the connections, and they create those networks. And I'm going to be technical in here, I apologize. There's a thing called network collapse. And often this network collapse happen to a lot of people that they haven't developed proper relationship with the mothers and fathers. And they get raped. Right? And the guy goes to the court and says, well, she didn't say anything. Well, she couldn't. She just couldn't. So this network collapse happened from the learning center that this is not a right behavior, to the automatic processing of fear, and that means shut down. So incapable of making an appropriate decision. So we take away that correct fast change of affect, of the way you feel, from the kid. And that's to do with the job of these frontal structures in the front of the brain. So your relationship with your kid is not your love for your kid, and your relationship, it just doesn't, it's not dependent on the kid's going to be good. No. Completely the opposite. Because you end up controlling the poor kid. Right? So you have to be good before I love you. And then the kid goes to another complex, tries to be everything to everyone at the expense of their own self. Because then that's the way I'm going to connect with someone. They're going to have to love me. That's something that kids' behavior teach that. And that's not a submitter way. God allows everyone to be free and experience their life. As he says, only the intelligent come to me. So we're allowed to have that experience. So your relationship with your kid is unconditional. And your feedback goes in to allow the kid to understand what it is they're doing in the world and what is within their capability, what is beyond their capability. And we come to that zone when we start looking at cognitive development, right? So this also, this controlling behavior, the kid earlier on learns that's going to be a connection with others. I'm going to have to do this so they love me. So you take that freedom away from your kid. So yeah, the kids want to be naughty, fine. Let them be naughty. That's how they're going to learn. And that, then again, the feedback process is reinforcing that brain development. So basically keep on telling your kid that you love them. Every time I went past my kid as he's growing up, I grab him, kiss him, and I say, I love you, bro. I love you. You just heard this about 1 trillion times from me. And I don't care what he does.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah.
Right.
God bless you, brother Homi. I don't want to stop you. I'm gonna just very, very quickly just a very quick interruption. I want to direct everyone to VC1-chat, please. If you all can sign up for the next event that we're going to be having, I'm gonna have to jump off in about 5-10 minutes. But please continue the event. I would love for everyone to stay as long as they want to continue the conversations, the good talks.
I don't see it there, brother. It's not there.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't press enter.
Now it's there. Now it's
I'm
there.
driving at the moment.
No, this is the old one, brother. This is the old one.
Okay. Would you be able to? Because I'm driving, I'm not able to do it properly.
Yeah, brother, I can take care of this for you.
God bless you, my brother. Thank you so
I'm
much.
gonna load it in VC1-chat.
Thank you so much.
There it is.
VC1-chat.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you.
VC1-chat.
Thank you very much.
Please, brother.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, brother. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. All right. So we were at that, but just affirming that you love your child regardless of anything at all, right? So moving fast from the past event allows kids to see a possibility. So the other aspect is that don't be stingy with your kids. I know there's a lot of financial constraints and everything else. You can reason with that. but God provides for them within those means. This is another thing that comes about, understanding your child. If the child has some sort of developmental disorder, still continue with that. But the main thing is that the child doesn't know what's happening to it. It's our job to help them understand what it is happening to them. What are the problems they face? What is happening to them? So they understand. And again, through subtlety, you can tell them about God, how he's doing everything else and how he creates everything. And also remind them they have a soul that is perfect. That is the one that they put their attention. Something that I didn't mention about discipline and boundary making is earlier on the children, they can go and run amok. But what happens is that you create a pattern of telling them there's something wrong and there is not a good feedback they're going to get. All right? So this is what I used to do when he's out there running amok, and I was looking at, don't run amok. What are you doing? You keep on doing it. It's okay. Well, this wasn't good because look what you did. So I'm going to take your favorite toy for 5 minutes. And like I said, which one's your toy? So I engage him with the boundaries. I says, this is my favorite toy, Dad. I said, okay, well, then unfortunately, that's going to go away for 5 minutes. And we're going to talk about it in 5 minutes. So we sit there and talk about it, and he's not very happy. So it goes on, comes back down. Then again, he forgets, because kids keep on forgetting. You have to keep on reminding them with patience. Then he goes and does the same thing, and I said, well, this time it's going to be 10 minutes, a bit longer. Oh, he says, okay, Daddy. So, all right, then that became 10 minutes, we talked about it, and that was the end of it. He actually understood that, because he's involved. Even God says that. He says, when you get disbelievers, give them a safe passage. Don't punish them in that. Give them a safe passage. Let them hear my word. And then return them to this place of their safety. Right? So in this way, even the child, when he does something catastrophically wrong, they come and tell you. So if you've got this negative way that we push the kids to automatic processing, go back to a place where they shut down, they can't come around and tell you what's wrong. So you cannot help. That's the communication that happens through love. Not have a fear of you, but love you. So major part that is never lie to your children. Even though if it's for their own protection. You just never lie. You explain in the best way you can. That's part of the learning, how we can become simple when we try to teach something complicated to a child that doesn't have that reasoning. And like the system that I adopted is earlier on, I told my son about anatomy, the female anatomy, genital anatomy. I told him how an appropriate response would be from someone, what he would say and what he wouldn't say, right? And then as he grew older, at about, say, he was year 5 and 6, I started teaching him about drugs, what drugs do, what human behaviors are. I took him through bully. I didn't complain that. I said, this is how you got to go through and deal with who someone's bully, because that's what you're going to see the rest of your life. Then he comes and tells me about it, so I can do something about it, right? And these early ages, this is 0 to 5, is where the kid's maximum capacity, the brain's maximum capacity is at these ages. Not only is just astronomically fast, but these connections are formed. Then at the age of 5, when they start hitting at the age of 5, there's this process called pruning occurs. You start basically cutting down a lot of neurons in the frontal part of the brain, right, to reduce that input. And these are the ones that either don't have a connection or disrupt, too much input goes in. At an early age, that too much input is actually good constructive, but as they grow older, they need focus. So too much input will take that focus away. That's why called pruning. The pruning occurs. So we come to the cognitive development, how all of this is going to create a space of submission in a household and let the child become a submitter, or accept the submission that God is going to put in that child within your family. Subtlety. Brain responds to subtlety, not bombastic information. People think, oh, it's fantastic to be bombastic. No, in fact, not. If you want something extremely effective, you become extremely subtle. It's like a whisper. And the whisper that I gave to my child from the beginning, when he started developing reasoning skills, was God is behind that. God is doing it. Isn't it amazing? Isn't God amazing? And to my astonishment, one day we were sitting there in the backyard, and these beautiful parrots we've got in Sydney. I live in a very, very densely bushy, foresty area. And these parrots, beautiful parrots, came, and I was taking pictures of them. And he said, he said, Daddy, look, it's just like God painted the birds. And I fell flat on my back. This is where he's seeing awe and he's attributing it to God. He says, God got a paintbrush and painted these birds, Daddy. Look how beautiful they are. And I say, praise be God. You're right, son. They are just amazing. Right? So at those times, the cognitive development theory that we are superimposing at this time for the child, the cognitive social cultural theory is saying that it's the positive interaction with adults. And who's the first adult in your child when you're talking about the age of 0 to 4? It's the parents, right? And this is even more intense in the first 2 years, right? So within that 2 to 3 years, if that becomes a negative response, right, you lose that relationship. You lose the trust. So what is the kid going to do? The kid is going to go to the peer where it's respected and has that connection. So you get out of the picture. You cannot then teach that subtlety of submission and God to your kid. This is called the zone of proximal development. I wasn't going to bring in this jargon in here, but basically is a gap between what a kid can achieve by herself or himself independently and what they can achieve with guidance and encouragement of a skilled partner. The skilled partner is an MKO, right? Is a parent. And there were experiments even done by Vygotsky, Jung, and Freud, where it's quite simple. But at early age, what they did was that they got a house, the doll's house, and they had different furniture. They said, okay, well, let's put the furniture where they should go. So they tested these both kids. They putting the table under the window or something because that's what they liked. And the other one was basically encouragement and guidance by a skilled parent. And then once that development went through, they tested again. And they actually showed that, in fact, what they learn, and that learning means the reasoning, development, that reasoning that we just said that happens through the prefrontal cortex of the brain, is now showing itself in reasoning skills in a society. And why that is important? Because the most knowledgeable member of the kid society, which is the MKO, right, is talking about God. Because you've got that trust, and then you find your kid, right, in the proximal developmental zone, then it's going to learn from the knowledgeable and trustworthy member of the family. And that's how I seed it. God into my child because I know the guidance would have come from him. Now God says in the Quran that I got the children of Adam and told them that I am your Lord. Do not take Satan for Lord. I am your Lord. So I know that intrinsically that existed within him. So subtly I confirmed it to him as he grew. Not complicated factors that you go and do this, go and do that, you have to go and do this, you have to go. No, simple, subtle way that God is doing it. This is how all. When I taught him how awesome the world is, that always accompanied with who's behind it. Simple way of creating it. So basically now here we've arrived at archetype as basically building the raw materials that that everything else that forms us works. And this is raw materials. It's the raw materials that exist in that soup of the brain that is developing. So the positive and negative reactions and complexes occurs by cooking this raw material and making it at an early age. That's what makes a submitter household. So we create the ground. God has already done it. So these archetypes form these complexes, and it's a result of how we experience, especially our mother and the father, through our mother and the father. Because this is the most impact that a child would have as they grow up. So as much as you can, try to have that communication and contact with your own child rather than someone else's. Because you've got to know your child. You know it's a specific behavior. They don't have to sit in the corner. They can be naughty with you, and you can teach them stuff. Because that actually influences the perception, belief systems of the child. That is how you raise the submitter kid. Because this is the determinant of development of a belief system in your child. So we go back to at this stage now, the child sees the society and now can go to, to play groups and gets to deal with other parents, the kids and friends, make friends or something, right? That develops the here is where the reasoning skills keep on developing. So here we have to be very careful as submitters to allow our children to experience different reasoning skills by different people in a society. What is traditional Muslims do is they actually prevent that connection and communication because they think, oh, the kid's going to go in there and, oh, going to learn, Christmas or something. So we don't want them to communicate. They could be friends, oh, that's not good for my daughter, oh, that's not good for my son. They can do bad things, right? So in a way, with that control factor, they're making the rest of society their enemies. Right? So when my child, went to school and they got Christmas tree, so he says, oh, Dad, I want a Christmas tree. He said, yeah, sure. Why don't we go and get one? When I got a fresh one, beautiful, put a Christmas tree. Now he's 15 years old. He reads the Quran at school on his phone, right? He doesn't have anything to do with the tree. But I just made sure that he has an appropriate connection because that feedback is important with his society. Not to make a judgment and not to make them the enemies and aliens, because at some point, as a submitter kid, he will come to that conclusion himself. Because community, that's why submission community, that's why we got, at the beginning of my talk, I asked the administrators, Brother Naveed, Brother AAA, Brother Dude, Brother Abdullah, the administrator of the system. I thank these people for providing the community of submitters. Because once this brain at this stage is developing, it's the community that I quote, making meaning. This is where the kid finds and then makes that meaning of submission. So the child can acquire belief and values. And this is what God teaches. And this is what you teach. But unless you go through these processes that we've been talking about, we get a standard development, and it'll become even harder at a later stage. Right? So, this is a collaborative, at this stage, once the kids, five, now it's 4, 5, it becomes a collaborative dialogue. So the kid learns that this collaboration they got with the more knowledgeable member of his or her society, they learn problem-solving strategies. Right? So my son goes to alhamdulillah, mashallah, one of the most selective schools here, right? And it's a Christian school. So the way I did it was so on Sunday we sit together, we spend some time early when he gets up, some time together. And I tell him the Quran stories. And I corroborate that with the Bible story. So I tell him that I remember Joseph was one of those in details. That story that I described to him, I read it in the Quran and then in the Bible. He says, that is the same story. I said, yeah, well, pretty much, because why? Because it's the same God. Yeah, it's the same God. So it's important not to make enemies or provoke judgments with the peers that he needs to trust and he needs to work and learn from. And I build up on that to a point where he comes in there and he complains about Christianity because how much he learns about it, right? He says, Daddy, this is idol worship. He comes and tells me, he says, oh, yeah, okay. He says, look what the Quran says. Look what they're saying. Yeah, that's right. But because God's doing everything, I made no enemies of him. So he actually goes in there and honestly listens to what they have to say. Then he develops his hearing, which is, that's what I said, this is why that is an important factor of a community. And that feedback community results in problem-solving strategies solely residing at the MKO, more knowledgeable members. And now I shifted that to the only knowledgeable existence, which is God. Now that God has become a construct of his reasoning. So he calls himself as a miracle. I don't have to do it. So in this way, you allow your child to develop ability of greater understanding of what's behind everything. And greater understanding are greater concepts, impossible concepts, as all of us have dealt with other people who come from, diaspora and talk to us on this server. Concept of God. Right?
Should I stop the event maybe?
I already did, buddy. Brother, I already did.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll stop here.
God bless
Thank
you,
you very
brother
much,
Homi. That
brother.
was a good 2-hour session.
Well, you guys gave Tommy the role teacher? That's crazy. I've never seen that role. Great at that.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you for all to endure my blabbering. So thank you for your patience. Thank you.
No, God bless you, brother. For a lot of people, I mean, a lot of people who are here, they definitely love listening to you and learning from you. MashaAllah.
Thank you. Thank you. God be praised.
Mashallah, I enjoy the way you express different developmental stages of children's brain and about parenting and the science behind it, and putting that together with what Quran is teaching us, and also in the society when our kids are, we have to coexist with others. And if the opportunity comes in best possible ways, uh, we talk about our common ground, God, but also to be able to judge for ourselves that what is idol worship and what is worshiping God alone, and working with that with our kids, with love and kindness. MashaAllah.
Thank you, sister. Thank you. MashaAllah to you.
No, I have to be frank here. I have made many mistakes, and unfortunately, maybe it was my wrong understanding that I learned from my understanding from other submitters, not in this group, was to force and forget that freedom of choice, and I think that's a big mistake, because we need to consider that freedom of choice and respect that, and with that, with love and kindness, invite them to the path of God, not by forcing. Yeah.
May I add something to you? You know, I hear a lot of complaints, right, about people. And this is exactly the way my approach is, right? And in fact, I was telling some people, says, well, I did this because I wanted to, support this other. I said, look, if two people are fighting, or, you find on the street one person, three people are bashing one person, you go in there and try to interfere, right? You're going to be bashed exactly like that. I said, it's not a matter of you throwing yourself in there. It's a matter of understanding people. And it doesn't happen if you don't love them. That is the main point that I learned as a parent, how my kid taught me. He taught me. I was talking to a friend of mine, and then he said, look, the way you're dealing with your child, you're going to be, the child's going to be taken by child support. And I just laughed. I said, yeah, they just couldn't handle it. They couldn't understand it. Right? So that, what you're just saying, is a parent in love. He learns to love that. Not to have any grudges. Fine, you can do it. But it doesn't take away my love, nor affection, and I wouldn't go digging holes behind your back. But then what it is that I'm talking about love. So we can't really take it, because as you said earlier on, your societies like Iran and Middle East and so on and so forth don't allow for that. They are two-faced. They raise people two-faced. And part of the other system that I hopefully, inshallah, with the will of God, we go through complex development and so on and so forth, is oppression at the core of it. It's something that we learned earlier on in the piece. To oppress someone, to make them coercive control, it's called. To be able to control them to do what it is that we want. And here, God disappears. And I keep on telling these people who've got complained about everyone else. He said, look, you just can't do that. Just get out of the mindset. This is the kind of mindset you need to have. This is where the healing occurs. So, yeah, it's really the other side of the things I'd like to say is that your kid trains you, but you got to be open enough as a student to learn. And this is an alien space. You know, for me, it was an alien space. I go from consuming brain for all my life to all of a sudden to something that is way beyond my wildest imagination. Wow. Yeah, okay. I can't go in and reason with the kid. So he teaches me. So I become open to being taught by the kid what it needs as he's growing older, what the changes occur. So what do I then provide? And this is what I do. Even when people complain, even in adult life,
Yeah,
it makes
mashallah.
no difference.
And I like to add that we as parents, we are sinners, and so are the kids. And when God says advocate righteousness, forbid evil, when mashallah kids are raised with word of God, and they correct parents, and we have to be open to that. In Middle Eastern society, we have made God out of parents, that no matter what, you have to obey parents, don't say anything, they make mistakes, follow them. No, that's God says follow God and way of righteous, only respect, honor, respect. Don't shout at them, but we can correct parents, we can say no to parents. We don't have to follow parents to please them. And that is just the dictatorship and oppression culture that now they dress it up as Islam and sell it as word of God.
Thank you, sister. Well done. I'm actually writing extensively a book about that, the hijacking of religion and what are the mechanisms behind it, what are the functionality of why that happens. So correct. Thank you.